At precisely 8:42 on January 26, 2026, the uneasy calm over the Alberine Sea broke in an instant. A French Navy H-225M Caracal helicopter was hovering above the deck of the oil tanker Volga M, a vessel sailing under the flag of Comoros, while being inspected over suspected restricted military cargo. Then, without warning, the tarp covering the stern was thrown aside, revealing an AK-630 close-in defense system already locked on targets. In less than 2 seconds, a storm of 30mm rounds filled the air at nearly 5,000 rounds per minute. The French pilots tried to bank hard left, but at that distance, there was almost no room to escape. The tail section was struck, the tail rotor failed, and the helicopter spun out of control before going down into the rough, white-capped sea. At that same moment, NATO surveillance screens detected a sudden change in the Volga M's radar profile. The electronic identification system triggered an urgent alert across the entire Link 16 network. The vessel had activated anti-ship missile guidance radar. 80 miles away, a US carrier strike group's E-2D Hawkeye picked up the signal and instantly relayed the coordinates. The opposing force believed it had achieved the perfect surprise move. What it did not know was that the US fleet had just activated an unprecedented response protocol. A high-stakes gamble had begun, and the next 13 minutes would unfold in a way no military planner could have fully predicted. This was not a random act. It was the opening move of an operation Moscow had been shaping for 6 months to protect the highly classified cargo aboard the Volga M. And the tanker was not alone. As soon as the French helicopter disappeared into the sea, 3 nearby cargo vessels, previously appearing as harmless green dots on radar, shut down their AIS tracking systems at the same time. They moved silently into blocking positions, using their hulls to form a drifting steel barrier. Their purpose was clear: delay rescue forces, shield the Volga M, and create a defensive wall around the flagship. This was the modern version of the 21st century Q-ship concept. Old Shadow Fleet vessels, once viewed as aging and expendable, had been converted into floating combat platforms. Hidden inside shipping containers were Club K cruise missile systems. With a single command, the container roofs could open, turning slow merchant ships into launch platforms capable of threatening targets across southern Europe. But their strongest protection was not only their firepower. It was what they carried below deck: crude oil. Russia was relying on the risk of an environmental catastrophe to limit the response of the American fleet. Any direct strike against the vessels could create a massive ecological crisis at the gateway to Europe, allowing Moscow to frame the West as the side responsible for the damage. Yet the greater danger was beneath the surface.
The Link 16 tactical network soon detected a faint but unmistakable acoustic signal. The mechanical signature of a torpedo tube hatch opening. That sound pointed to an improved Kilo 636.3 class submarine, known by many as the Black Hole of the Ocean. Using the noise of merchant traffic as cover, it had slipped deep into the formation, prepared its tubes, and waited in silence. Moscow's plan was becoming clear. The downing of the helicopter was meant to create a crisis so intense that NATO would hesitate, step back, and avoid escalation. The goal was to break the economic blockade without forcing a direct conventional battle. Every detail had been calculated. They believed the United States would not risk making the first major move. It was a cold and logical strategy, but also an extremely dangerous one when facing the most advanced naval force on the planet. What do you think? Could the United States break this standoff? Type 1 in the comments if you think they could. The moment the French pilot's final Mayday transmission cut through the radio channels, the Aegis combat system aboard the USS Arleigh Burke automatically placed its vertical launch system on standby. The American captain ordered maximum speed.
At 30 knots, the destroyer's bow cut through the water like a steel blade as it moved towards the Volga M, with the French air defense frigate FS Forbin supporting from the flank. As the American warship closed the distance, it activated a long-range acoustic device and directed an intense sound wave toward the Russian vessel's command tower. "This is the United States Navy. You are surrounded. Shut down your engines immediately, or we will take coercive measures." At first, the tactic appeared to be working. The Volga M began to lose speed. The smoke from its funnels grew thinner, and its fire control radar seemed to shift into standby mode. Seeing a narrow opening, the American destroyer launched 2 RHIB high-speed boats carrying specialized search and rescue swimmers. From above, MH-60R Seahawk helicopters moved in low over the waves, guiding the rescue effort toward the drifting French crew. But as the rescue boats reached the 800-meter mark, the Volga M made its next move. Valves beneath the hull suddenly opened, releasing tons of crude oil mixed with chemical agents into the surrounding water. Seconds later, automated ignition devices dropped from containers on the deck. A heavy blast rolled across the sea, and a 5-meter wall of flame rose between the rescuers and their target. The RHIB teams were forced to turn sharply, avoiding the burning barrier that now blocked their path. At the same time, Russian escort vessels began moving in a crisscross pattern, forming a physical shield between the American destroyer and the Volga M. In a matter of seconds, the situation shifted from tense to critical. Thick black smoke climbed into the sky, cutting visibility and turning the entire area into a confusing maze of heat, radar clutter, and moving steel. Then the lids on the containers aboard the 3 escort ships opened at once with a sharp hiss of compressed air. Dozens of upgraded Lancet 3M loitering drones launched into the sky, rising like a dark swarm over the formation. Their mission was not to sink ships directly. They were aimed at the fleet's most sensitive systems: phased array radar panels, satellite communication antennas, and optical sensors. At that same moment, the Volga M revealed its most important defensive tool: a naval version of the Krasuka 4 electronic warfare system activated at full strength. Rather than using an unrealistic pulse effect, it unleashed a powerful multi-band jamming attack. High-energy radio interference spread across the sea, overwhelming GPS signals and choking the Link 16 tactical data network within a 30-kilometer radius. It was the perfect range to isolate the American and French warships from their command network. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Arleigh Burke, the advanced Spy-6 radar screens suddenly filled with chaos. Hundreds of ghost targets appeared at once, overwhelming the fire control computer and making it nearly impossible to separate real drones from false signals created by the electronic attack. The Phalanx close-in defense system responded automatically, sending a storm of 20mm rounds across the sky and sea surface. But in the heavy electronic interference, its accuracy dropped sharply. One Lancet slipped through the defensive screen, dived toward the French frigate FS Forbin, and impacted near its main radar tower. The ship remained afloat, but the damage disabled its phased array radar, leaving one of NATO's most capable air defense vessels effectively blind in the middle of the confrontation. And the crisis was still escalating. Beneath the surface, an American sonar operator picked up a sound that immediately changed the atmosphere inside the command room: the opening of launch tube hatches 1 and 2 on the Russian Kilo-class submarine. The unseen threat below the waves was now preparing to make its move. The captain of the USS Arleigh Burke, a highly experienced officer, understood the trap. Meeting force with force might still win the battle, but it would also push the confrontation exactly where Moscow wanted it to go. The United States needed a different answer, one that would disable the enemy's command structure without setting off the oil-covered sea. A surgical move against the enemy's nervous system. An urgent order was transmitted to Electronic Attack Squadron 142 aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, positioned beyond the horizon.
Moments later,
2 EA-18G Growlers roared toward the crisis zone,
carrying next-generation jammer pods and a classified high-power microwave system that had only recently completed testing. At the same time, a P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft operating near Sicily dropped to lower altitude and began deploying a network of active sonar buoys across the water. The solution was not brute force. It was high-frequency electronic warfare. The Growlers did not chase individual targets. Instead, they activated a phased array microwave sweep across the entire Russian formation. Like an invisible storm, the energy moved through gaps, seams, and exposed electronics, overloading capacitors and disrupting semiconductor circuits inside the AK-630 system and the Club K launch platforms. On Russian control screens, weapon systems began shutting down one after another. Panels flickered, alarms sounded, and key electronics failed, while the ships themselves appeared almost untouched from the outside. At the same time, the P-8A Poseidon moved to contain the threat below the surface. It released an Mk-54 Mod 2 torpedo programmed to activate at a safe distance from the target. The resulting hydroacoustic shockwave slammed into the hull of the Kilo-class submarine with overwhelming force. For the crew inside, who were already focused on every sound in the water, the pressure wave hit like a warning from the deep.
The Russian captain had no choice but to order an emergency dive and cut the torpedo guidance line to protect the submarine's sensitive sonar system from further damage. Realizing that the ship's electronic systems had been disabled, the captain of the Volga M made one final desperate move. American signals intelligence intercepted an encrypted command from a handheld device, requesting remote activation of charges attached near the sea valves. The safety delay was only 2 minutes. If the tanker was lost, thousands of tons of oil would pour into the sea, putting the stranded French crew in immediate danger, creating a massive environmental crisis and, most importantly, destroying all evidence of the ship's hidden weapons. The American captain responded instantly. He ordered the SEAL team to carry out one of the riskiest boarding operations the unit had ever faced. 2 MH-60 helicopters roared through the thick black smoke rising from the burning oil slick and hovered dangerously close above the Volga M's command section. It was an all-or-nothing move, with almost no room for error. 16 SEALs fast-dropped onto the upper deck in near-zero visibility. Their only objective was the bridge, where the central activation panel was located. They pushed through the narrow corridors leading to the wheelhouse, facing heavily armed private military contractors who were trying to hold their position at any cost. Meanwhile, the countdown kept moving. 110 seconds.
100 seconds. Everyone understood the danger. One uncontrolled round striking a high-pressure oil line or one device going off in the wrong place could turn the entire ship into a disaster zone. Outside, the American destroyer adjusted its position to 1,200 meters, far enough to reduce the danger from debris, but close enough to maintain pressure. Its 127mm gun turret turned toward the Russian vessel's hull, ready to deliver an emergency disabling shot if the boarding team failed and the crisis began to spread. The air was heavy with tension. 92 seconds remained. For a moment, it felt as if the whole world was holding its breath. Then a sharp blast shook the command section. But it did not come from the oil tanks. It came from a frame charge, as the SEAL team forced open the reinforced steel door to the bridge. Smoke and dust filled the room. Short controlled bursts ended the final resistance inside. One operator rushed to the control panel and struck the remote signal receiver with the butt of his rifle, just as the indicator light turned bright red. The countdown screen went dark with 7 seconds left. For a few moments, the breach fell into complete silence. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the soldiers who had just stepped back from the edge. The Volga M now sat motionless in the sea, black smoke rising from electronic systems damaged by the microwave attack.
Once the Russian escort ships realized their flagship had been seized and command had collapsed, they turned away and headed toward international waters under the cover of night, leaving their allies behind.
The United States and France had secured the vessel. The French crew members were pulled into rescue boats, soaked, exhausted, and shaken, but alive. Still, this was not a clean victory. The Russian Kilo-class submarine used the chaos to dive deep and escape, carrying with it valuable data from the confrontation. The seizure of the Volga M exposed the world to the danger of containerized missile systems and the ruthless methods of the Shadow Fleet. But it also opened a darker chapter for maritime security. The oceans were no longer the predictable space many had believed them to be. The boundaries of modern conflict had shifted, and the next time another Shadow vessel makes its move, there may not be a final 7-second window to stop the chain reaction. For now, the United States had preserved a fragile balance, but beneath the foaming waves of the Mediterranean, the shadow of a much larger conflict was still waiting for its next chance.